I was watching an episode on ABC, and there was a beautiful Russian woman who shared a story about her childhood. When she was 4 years old, she lived in Russia with her mother, and they were incredibly poor. There was one day in particular where her mother, before she left for work, she told this 4-year-old girl that she was to have nothing to eat that day. When her mom returned home from work that evening, this 4-year-old girl informed her mom that she had, in fact, eaten lipstick. Now, her mother became outraged and actually told her to leave and to never come back. Shockingly, this Russian woman expressed that as a 4-year-old girl, she knew in that moment that her mother was serious. And so she left. She spent the next several years of her life in an orphanage. When she was 13 years old, she was given the opportunity to either stay in Russia or to join a family in America. One of her teachers at the orphanage told her that if she decided to stay in Russia, her life would be in black and white. She would likely go into prostitution to support herself, and that would be her life. If, however, she chose to go to America, her life would be in color. Now, I've thought a lot about this concept of a life in color. After all, she was talking about a life in America, a life like mine. As I pondered about this concept, another experience came to mind. When I was in Norway as a young missionary, I met a sweet, sweet African man who had lost his vision 8 years earlier. He invited a friend and I over to his home to visit. When we got there, he led us up this tiny little rickety staircase up to his front door where we could barely squeeze in single file. And then he walked us down a hallway that had sheetrock on one side with slanted ceilings, plywood, 2x4s, and wires strung so that his clothes could hang to dry. We ducked down this little hallway and came around the corner to an itty bitty little room that had boxes stacked all the way up to the ceiling. He flawlessly poured a couple cups of tea, and then he stopped. And he looked up off into the distance as though he could see for miles. And with tears running down his cheeks, he began to tell us how good God had been to him. All this man could see was blackness, and yet his heart and his smile were brimming with color. I learned from that man that day that there is certainly more to life than what meets the eye. Now, although I always try to see the colors in my own life, there are certainly times when my view becomes cloudy. When I was in high school, I had this dream to become a pharmacist. I worked really hard and I got into pharmacy school, and I felt like I sold my soul to get through pharmacy school and to get through residency, and I finally got my dream job as a pharmacist at the Mayo Clinic. 9 months into this job, I became incredibly sick with an autoimmune disease, and my job functionality became incredibly restricted. I was a 28-year-old brand new pharmacist. I had $200,000 of student debt hanging over my head, and I was nearly bedridden. During this time, I wrote to attempt to explain my reality. I titled it Through the Looking Glass, and I explained that I could see all of the things that I loved to do. I could see the way that I wanted to advance my career. I could see all of the relationships that I wanted to invest in, and yet I just felt like I was hitting this glass wall. I wrote, if only I could spend my day thinking about something else or someone else other than just barely being able to get myself through the day. And then I continued, that day will come. I will keep fighting, and when that day does come, I hope that this letter will be there as a reminder to me of how lucky I am to be able to really, really live. Now, I think it's human nature that when things go wrong or things get hard in life, we think that it's some sort of punishment or maybe even something that we didn't deserve. However, I'm reminded of a scripture from a book called Doctrine and Covenants that states, for if they didn't know bitter, they could not know the sweet. Sometimes it's through those greatest struggles in our lives that we really start to notice all of those precious things. Now, I hope that as we go through this incredibly challenging time as a nation, and also as you go through your own struggles in your own life, that you'll remember this sweet African man who lost his vision 8 years prior. Sometimes it might feel like all you can see is blackness, but the colors in your life might just be shining more radiant than ever. You just have to be willing to channel your heart to see them.